Buyers Vacation Rentals. Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the super chat as well. This char probably won't make it to the screen. I'm glad I pulled off the upset there. Thank you, Buyers. But a lot of non-starting receivers looked terrible. A lot of one-on-one battles lost.
Yeah, freshman Caleb Burton was the receiver on the interception where he didn't really do anything to break that up. But he also had another one where he was running free and got very wide open on a deep pass that didn't get to him. But yeah, that's why they're non-starters, and it's only spring. Are they playing next weekend? Is there a game next weekend? I'm not sure. I have to check the schedule. I don't believe the regular season starts for a little bit longer yet. But I mean, the non-starting receivers are just freshmen and walk-ons at this point because they didn't have Julian Fleming, and we talked about Jaden Ballard's a redshirt freshman, and yeah, he had some issues with his hands, but again, he's young, and everybody else is young or walk-on, and so, you know, what do you expect? Not everybody is Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith and Jigba as freshmen. Not even Emeka Ibuka or Marvin Harrison in the spring.
Right, and you got to remember too, they're running a lot of base stuff out there. There's not a lot of pizzazz, and by the way, too, they're not necessarily hooking up with C.J. Stroud there, who is going to be the quarterback this year. Not Devin Brown, not Kyle McCord. It's going to be C.J. Stroud. So there's a lot there, and it's just kind of a easy comment to make to say, well, this guy was targeted 6 times and made 2 receptions, and this guy did this or that. But I think if you sit there and you really kind of peel back the layers, it's you can't go and watch a spring game and predict doom and gloom, and you just can't watch a spring game and say, well, everything's hunky-dory and completely fixed. You have to frame everything properly. So I think this takes a little bit more framing.
I am enjoying the Michael Campbell. Also, him I believe on Twitter he was celebrating the Notre Dame's recruiting title for 2023, and doing that in April is a lot like Michigan celebrating their September Heismans. You know, it's all meaningless, and if you're celebrating a recruiting title in April, it's because you've never paid attention to recruiting in your life, because it's not until October, November, December where the SEC comes in and is like, yeah, we're going to take this guy and this guy and this guy, and we'll take one of yours and we'll take 2 of yours. And so I guess celebrate it while you can.
Exactly.
Celebrating it.
How takes Keon Keeley, or anybody takes Keon Keeley out of Notre Dame, we may have to put out a wellness check for Michael, because that's going to hurt.
If they're celebrating at Notre Dame, then they're probably tipping cars or probably cows in Lubbock, Texas, because Texas Tech is number 2 right now. Don't think that's going to hold. So.
Well, and really, it's just amazing that Notre Dame can find so many scholar athletes that are willing to, that have already qualified to enroll in Notre Dame, because we know how difficult it is for Notre Dame to recruit with their high academic standards.
And Texas Tech being number 2 right now is a matter of they have 15 commitments. So all those nickels and dimes start to add up after a while in terms of recruiting points. Just wait until everybody else starts to kind of fill in.
Do appreciate all these Notre Dame fans jumping in here. D-Rock Irish is here all the time, but they've made it their way to the Ohio State channel from our main channel, I guess. So thanks for being here. Appreciate that. We've got a conversation coming up with Brian Driscoll from Irish Breakdown this afternoon, so we will post that soon, because Notre Dame's got its spring game coming up on the Peacock Network. Yes, this Saturday. All right. And one thing, not to backtrack, but yes, I will backtrack. So I do intend to backtrack. When it was stated by somebody that it was okay for Ohio State to go 10-2 or something that was reasonable or acceptable, we had a conversation on our Michigan show last week or the week before, and it was stated by one of our hosts, Dre, also Michigan fan, that basically he was okay with the 9-3 season this year. He thought, okay, we've lost all this talent. We've lost maybe potential 3 first-round picks. We're, 9-3 would be okay. I wouldn't be celebrating, but it would be okay. And then later in the show, he mentioned that Ohio State's and Michigan's expectations were similar. And I went, whoa, we've got a disconnect here, because you told me 10 minutes ago that you were okay with 9-3. There's not an Ohio State fan on the planet that's satisfied with 9-3. 10-2, not satisfied with 10-2. It's we win the Big Ten championship, and basically that enters us into the playoff, and that's what it's got to be.
Michigan has 3 toss-up games this year. 2 of them are at home with Penn State and Michigan State. The third is at Iowa. And if they go 9-3 with 3 toss-up games, that's a bad year. It's a disappointing year.
Schedule. Absolutely.
Yeah, if they lose more than 3 games, that means they lost all the toss-ups and then managed to lose one that they most certainly should have won. Their schedule is not as challenging as some other teams out there. Just put it that way.
Hellfresh, appreciate the contribution. Thank you so much for that. Spring game is a lose-lose if DBs whatever. They do well, then the wide receivers suck. If the wide receivers do well, then the DBs suck. Offensive line does well, defensive line sucks, so forth and so on. I would say that it's a pretty simple conclusion, though, that the wide receiver defensive back matchup seems to be the easiest to evaluate and the closest in a spring game to what the regular season is. Just that one-on-one matchup in space, to me.
And that's what Ryan Day said. He was looking forward to watching that and the defensive ends and offensive tackles. Like, those were the one-on-one matchups he was looking forward to watching in the spring. And he got that. And that's what I really enjoyed watching the corners, because I thought they played pretty well in that game. And they were there knocking the balls away and also supporting the run.
Yeah, I thought there was plenty to like on the defensive side of the ball. They've made some progress. And now we'll see how they pull it together, in the fall. I'm interested, intrigued. I like what I've seen so far. I want to see more. So guess it's worth tuning in this fall to see how the story will go.
Yeah, the long wait begins before we get to see them on the field doing something and getting into fall camp, and then obviously opening up the season against Notre Dame. People will wear out their copies of the spring game and overanalyze every single little thing that they see there. And I guarantee you that 10 people could watch one play and there could be 12 different opinions that come out of it. And that's, part of the beauty of the sport and part of the reason why we're able to do this and talk about this and have, so many great people associated, because let's be honest, it's better than real life.
Absolutely to that. Any word on Mitchell Milton, of course, injured in the spring game? Excuse me. So, Steve, you had mentioned earlier in the chat, no additional word there.
No, nothing there. I guess it was a non-contact injury, which you hate to see that, obviously, because it could be a sprain or a tear or something along those lines that just take a bad step and you never know what happens. So I guess we're waiting for a post-spring debrief with Coach Day, probably in a couple of weeks. They're all out on the road recruiting right now. So I guess when those guys are done with their on-the-road recruiting, we will have a chance to sit down with Coach Day and a few of the assistant coaches and hopefully get a final verdict from them on what they liked, what they didn't like, what's still out there to improve on, and any injury updates as well.